What was the major mistake that led to Napoleon's downfall? Napoleon Bonaparte, one of history's most brilliant military strategists and leaders, rose to unprecedented power during the early 19th century, creating a vast French empire that stretched across much of Europe. Yet, despite his genius, a single critical decision set the stage for his eventual downfall: the ill-fated invasion of Russia in 1812. This campaign, often regarded as one of the greatest military blunders in history, irreversibly weakened Napoleon's army and his hold on Europe. But what made this mistake so catastrophic, and why did it mark the turning point in his reign? Napoleon's decision to invade Russia was born from a combination of ambition, hubris, and strategic miscalculation. By 1812, the French emperor had established himself as the dominant force in Europe. However, tensions with Russia had been brewing ever since Tsar Alexander I withdrew from the continental system, a trade embargo designed by Napoleon to weaken Britain economically. Enraged by this defiance, Napoleon sought to punish Russia and compel them back into compliance. However, he underestimated the scale of the task and the resilience of his adversary. Napoleon assembled the Grand Armée, a massive force of over 600,000 soldiers drawn from across his empire, believing that sheer numbers and his military prowess would quickly subdue Russia. Yet Russia's vastness and climate presented challenges unlike anything Napoleon had faced before. Rather than confronting Napoleon in decisive battles, the Russians adopted a scorched-earth strategy, retreating deeper into their territory while destroying crops, resources, and infrastructure. This left the French army without the supplies they needed to sustain themselves, forcing them to rely on an already strained supply chain stretched across immense distances. One of Napoleon's gravest miscalculations was his failure to prepare for the brutal Russian winter. Believing the campaign would be swift, he neglected to adequately supply his army with winter clothing and provisions. As the campaign dragged on, the Grand Armée reached Moscow in September 1812, only to find the city abandoned and largely set ablaze by the retreating Russians. With no shelter or resources, Napoleon's forces were left stranded in hostile territory as the temperatures plummeted. Starvation, disease, and exposure to the cold took a devastating toll on the French troops. The retreat from Moscow proved disastrous. Harassed by Russian forces and plagued by frostbite, hunger, and exhaustion, the Grand Armée disintegrated. By the time they crossed back into friendly territory, fewer than 100,000 soldiers remained. The staggering loss of life, morale, and resources shattered the aura of invincibility that had surrounded Napoleon, and emboldened his enemies across Europe. The catastrophic failure in Russia marked the beginning of the end for Napoleon's empire. The invasion of Russia exposed the limits of Napoleon's military genius and highlighted the dangers of overreach. His once loyal allies began to turn against him, forming the Sixth Coalition, which ultimately defeated him in 1814. After a brief exile to Elba, he returned to power during the 100 Days, only to meet his final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. Napoleon's Russian campaign serves as a timeless lesson in the perils of hubris, underestimating one's enemies, and failing to account for the unforgiving forces of nature. It was not just a military defeat, but a devastating misstep that irrevocably altered the course of European history. Napoleon's dream of a unified Europe under French rule crumbled, and his downfall was set in motion by his overconfidence and refusal to heed the warnings of reality.